Hey guys, welcome to another behind the scenes. In this video, we're going to look at the Watering Fairy Skylight Highlight Sky Factory animation, as well as the Tom Going Crazy from My Night Season 1. So here we have the Sky Factory one. You can see here I've chopped off all the terrain. After I went through and animated it all, I saw the camera never showed anything besides the farm area, so I went ahead and just got rid of that. Now, there isn't too much to talk about this except for rendering, which I feel like has kind of been a trend for the past couple of weeks. I'm always just talking about viewport rendering, basically. But I tried some things differently, which I think turned out for a much better result in the end. I guess you guys can be the judge watching back, playing back the video. But I think it actually looked a lot better in this video compared to other viewport rendered ones. Like I said, I wanted to try two things because I was originally going to render this with the Mentoy render. I've mentioned this in the past that outdoor scenes just don't work too well for the viewport render. Just don't work too well with the outdoor scenes. Mainly because of shadows in that case, because the viewport is only compatible with depth map shadows, which aren't good for large pieces of terrain and aren't good for complicated shapes like the foliage and stuff, like leaves and grass and stuff, which have those complicated shapes, and especially these crops. So usually just the viewport render not good for outdoor. But like I said, I wanted to try two things, so I went ahead and did that instead of using Mentoy for this. So first off was the lighting method. So I'll just go ahead and show you the lighting for this. I've got two bounce lights here. I've got these 2-point lights, which give some color. You can see, you get some orange on the right and some blue on the left. And then there's this ambient light. Now, usually I don't like to use ambient lights when it comes to Mentoy render because there are indirect lighting you can use for that, like Final Gathering, which kind of take care of that for you. And if you incorporated a ambient light for that, it would kind of just wash out the shadows. But when it comes to the viewport render, you don't have those indirect lighting stuff, so it can be useful to use an ambient light here and there. But I've got one here just emitting some white light just to kind of fill out some of the dark areas. And then I've got these there's actually two key lights. So you can see there's a directional light going on to, casting all the shadows and stuff. But there's actually two of them and they're slightly offset. And what this allows me to do is basically double the resolution on the depth map shadows and get not exactly doubling it, but it's kind of doing that, and it results for much better looking shadows. So you can see, especially with the foliage here, usually this would just be kind of just like a weird blob that didn't really look anything remotely like the plant, but you can see you get that pretty well defined shadow for all these crops here. And if you look closely at the shadow casted by the wood planks here, you can see those look pretty well as also. So having those just slightly offset like that just kind of give you those two depth map shadow, basically, because depth map shadows are basically textures. So you've got those two textures which have a limited resolution and they're just offset a little bit off each other, which turned out really well. The second thing different, and this was much more important, was the rendering method. Now usually to render out a scene using the viewport render or any other render for that matter, I'll go in my render settings, render using Maya Harbor 2.0, which is just the same thing as viewport 2.0. But this is the batch render version, so I can use all my render settings, like how many frames to render, what resolution, what camera to render out of, and stuff like that. Now, the problem with this, and I mentioned this in the past, is when you batch render through the viewport, it doesn't look exactly like the viewport. Now, normal circumstances, it would look exactly like the viewport, but in my case, you can get a much better looking result out of the viewport if you enable some GPU overrides through NVIDIA's control panel. You can enable override the anti-aliasing, texture filtering, and a couple other things, which make the viewport look a lot better, but those will only show up in the viewport. If you play blast it, if you batch render it, none of those overrides will show up, and you'll just get the stock effects on the viewport, if you will, if that makes any sense. I go more in depth with that in past behind the scenes, so if you've watched those, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. So those usually don't render out, and that's kind of frustrating, and I've mentioned that in the past. In this case, I literally just took the camera, so this is the camera it rendered out of, and full screened it and screen captured it. So what you're seeing is me just just sitting there watching this playback. Now, I couldn't just do it normally, so if I were to play back right now, you'll see it's going to be kind of slow. Let me go into, so normal circumstances when I'm animating stuff, I'll set the playback speed to real time, so that way it's going to play back at the 24 frames a second, playback at 1 second, being 1 second in real life, whatever. hence the name real time. But at the cost of dropping frames if it can't keep up. So in this scene right now, smooth mesh is enabled. There's a couple particles which probably aren't slowing it down too much. All the shadows and those and anti-aliasing, all that stuff is enabled. So it's not going to play back at real time. It's going to have to drop frames. So you can see if I hit play right here, it's pretty choppy. I don't know how well it'll show up in the capture, but it's pretty choppy. So a way around, if you want to get rid of the choppiness, you can go to playback speed to play every frame real time, max real time. And so this, what we'll do, will at the cost of playback speed, it'll force every frame to show. So you can see now it's playing back slow, but we're getting every single frame. So I could capture this and then just speed it up. The problem with that is that it's going to be, the frame rates are inconsistent. Some parts it might be playing 15 frames a second, and some parts where there's a lot of motion or something like that, it only might be playing at like 10 frames a second. And so if I were to record this and speed it up, then you'd get inconsistent playback speed. So a way around this was to go, if I go in my time slider settings and I can set the playback speed to other and set a specific frame rate. Watch playing it back, I noticed the frame rate never dipped below 8. So I set it to 8 and hit save. Now this is different. I'm not changing the frame rate of the video. I'm just telling it to play back at 8 frames, 8 of those frames per second. So I know that kind of can be confusing, but it's different than actually changing the frame rate of the video, because that would throw off the particle simulation and a bunch of other stuff. But so yeah, that way, so if I'm playing at 8 frames a second, since it never goes below that, it's always going to be above that. So it's going to be able to handle playing that at a consistent 8 frames a second. So then I was able to do that, play it back, get exactly 8 frames a second throughout the whole video, and then in post, since it's supposed to be at 24 frames a second, I can just triple the speed and it'll look normal. If I watch it back, I don't know, you can go watch the video again and tell me what you think. I can notice a couple drop frames here and there. Not a big deal. I don't think it's something you'll really notice unless you're looking for it. But yeah, those were kind of the lighting and the capture method really improved the look of it. Because, well, the reason capturing it was better is because then I get to use all those GPU overrides for the anti-aliasing, texture filtering, those a couple other little things that really made it look a lot better. So I guess that's up to you if you think it looked better. But let's go ahead and jump into the next scene. All right, so here we are in the Tom going crazy animation from My Night to season 1. This is the same house from the triple kill video, which I did my best to recreate by hand. You can, if you just look at them side by side with the real house from My Night, you'll notice it looks a lot different, but it's close enough to not be noticeable on its own, I guess, for the purposes of the video at least. And I noticed you guys really respond well to the season 1 My Night highlight animations. They're fun to make, but I like to mix it up. You know, I don't want to always be spamming My Night animations all the time, so I like to do animations from various series. But there might be, you know, a 2 or 3 minute long special My Night animation coming up next week. It's not a season 3 trailer or anything like that. It's from season 1. It's just a longer video. Crap. I don't want to. I hope you didn't think I was hinting at a season 3 trailer. Nope, definitely not a season 3 trailer. And now I'm sounding sarcastic. Wow, I'm probably just gonna have to cut this part out. Anyway, let's get to the actual video. Yeah, so there isn't too much to talk about. This was a mentally rendered one. You can see this is, so for the lighting on this, there's just one big light that casts, you know, the basically that represents the sun. And then, as I mentioned in the last video, the indirect lighting, that final gathering, kind of similar to global illumination, but not really. Kind of similar though. Did the work of filling in all the lights and all the indoor lighting bouncing around and stuff like that. So there's only one light in the scene. Then you have Tom, and I don't know if I've ever showed this, but for glass, if you ever brought out a scene by default out of, you know, whatever exporter you decide to use, you might notice the glass looks like this. So you can see both sides of it. You're not supposed to be able to see the inside side unless you're looking from the outside or from the inside. I just got tongue twisted there. But anyway, you'll notice you can see both planes at the same time, which normal glass in Minecraft doesn't look like that. If you disable double-sided, well, at least in, oops, I have the wrong thing selected. At least in Maya, you have this option under render stats to disable double-sided. So you only see the facing, you only see the object that you're facing the same direction as the normals. Then you'll get the way the glass is supposed to look. I don't know if I ever really showed that, but yeah, that makes the glass look proper. If I go ahead and scrub through, there isn't, like I said, there isn't too much to talk about. This is one of your really just straightforward kind of animate animation, no like little effects or anything like that with it. But yeah, I mean, I don't even know what else to say about this one. There's a really pretty simple one. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You notice rendering through the viewport with a scene like this, where there was all this terrain, I wanted to make sure if there's any shots, you'd see full background and not just cut off. You can see with a scene like this, using a depth map shadow, there'd be like 1 pixel per block and it would look horrible. So definitely this is like one of those scenes that just would not work at all if you tried to use the viewport renderer, at least if you try to cast shadow across this whole thing. But anyway, that's it for this. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like, and thanks for watching.